Good evening and welcome to another round of discussion on Talking Films Online. Talking Films Online, or TFO in short, is an informal coming together of academics, teachers, students, researchers, filmmakers, and cinephiles interested in cinema. More importantly, interested in talking and writing about cinema. The online group came together quite spontaneously during the pandemic and lockdown in June 2020. Geeta here and I have been coordinating the activities of TFO since its inception, but we have all of you who keep us on our toes and make us week after week set up new kinds of discussions and new people to interact with through TFO. We have organized many online events, over 150 in fact. We have also had several month-long film festivals and discussions curated by scholars, also by cinephiles, and so on. We've also had a galaxy of film directors and subtitlers, producers, people from the film industry who joined TFO now and then for the discussions. In fact, just last week, some of you may have seen that Amol Palekar was on Talking Films Online. In addition to these weekly discussions, every year to mark the anniversary of TFO, we also organize a smartphone short film competition for students between 18 to 25 years of age. We had that in June as well this year. Our aim is to get a conversation going around cinema and to get as many people involved in the process as possible. With all our events being online, anyone and everyone interested in cinema is welcome to our forum. We also have a blog called talkingfilmsonline.wordpress.com where we encourage all kinds of writings on cinema. So if any of you is interested in posting something on the blog, please reach out to Geeta or me. We have a YouTube channel called Talking Films Online where you can watch some of our discussions. We are on Facebook. TFO is a private group on Facebook. We are on Instagram and WhatsApp as well. Today we are very happy to welcome, for this discussion, Saundarya Jain. In fact, this is an unusual thing in the sense that Samvartha suggested this film to us, Be Natural, and suggested that Saundarya Jain would be the apt person to introduce the film and initiate a discussion today. So we reached out to Saundarya and here she is. Saundarya is no stranger to Talking Films Online. In fact, in December last year, she curated the Women's Cinema Festival along with Ajanta Sarkar, who also suggested a film as part of the festival. So a very warm welcome, Saundarya, to you, and thank you for agreeing to initiate discussion on the film at short notice. Passionate film buff, Saundarya loves watching and discussing films and journaling copious notes and personal reflections about them. She believes films to be an illuminating mirror and a comforting escape. As a proud feminist, Saundarya is also fascinated with the idea that women bring a different language to cinema. Having closely witnessed the crucial role of gender in life, gender issues are deeply personal for her. Saundarya works as a features writer in print media. Welcome, Saundarya, and over to you. We're really looking forward to the discussion tonight. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would first like to mention that I'm really grateful that TFO took up this movie and Samvartha sir recommended this documentary, because the entire time I had just goosebumps while watching the documentary, and it was an experience that I've never had before. You know, as a woman, as a movie lover, it was one of a kind, and it made me think of every book on film history I've ever read, or every article or every crash course that I've watched on YouTube about film history, and how I've never come across her name before I was introduced to her last year, I guess. And this was the first time that I watched this documentary, as I'm sure a lot of you did. And it was really astonishing to me how, whenever we talk about the nascent stage of cinema and we talk about imagination and illusion, names like George Méliès come up, but never Alice Guy, who was one of the pioneers in this space. The documentary is about her life as the first female director, her contribution as an almost the founding figure of cinema, and how those efforts have gone overlooked by history. Nowadays I say the first female director, but nowadays it's actually frowned upon to call a lady a female director, because you don't say that about men. Men in filmmaking are the norm. But if a woman is directing, she has broken ground. On the other hand, Alice Guy was one of those who laid the ground or the foundation of cinema. I need to highlight this because somewhere down the line, filmmaking came to be defined as a profession meant for men. The genius of the author, the myth of that genius has always been centered around a man. We have always recognized and rewarded the male genius so much more easily. For instance, Hitchcock, Orson Welles, Bergman, Kurosawa, Fellini. A woman has rarely ever made that list. This is why I feel it's very important to emphatically point out that not only Alice Guy was the first female director, but she was also one of the first authors ever. For instance, we see in the documentary how beautifully she experimented with the form of cinema itself, from using synchronized sound and close-ups to working across a myriad of genres, and most importantly, keenly understanding the art of script writing and editing. She was a pioneer of cinema in every creative and technical way. I also believe she flouted the stereotype that women can't be business savvy, because she ran her own studio and quite successfully till a certain point. Also, her filmography easily surpasses that of her contemporaries like the Lumiere brothers and George Méliès. She was one step ahead of Edison also in using sound in film, and she mastered comedy well before Chaplin. Nevertheless, for the most part of cinema's history, she has remained absent from it, and the documentary sheds quite a lot of light on this. And as it starts to put together the pieces of these lapses in history, one thing becomes clear, that her role as a director, forget the first female director, her role as a director faced a kind of systemic neglect as time passed on. Her work was wrongly attributed to men, mostly by male film scholars. And more heartbreakingly, once the art of cinema became industrialized, it got harder for her to find work. I mean, was it even possible for her to make the kind of movies that she made at Solax or Gormor? Because now the bottom line started dictating cinema. Not to forget, by then, the male genius had become the mascot of filmmaking. So while history was shutting Alice Guy out at this point in time, it also made me wonder how truly inaccessible filmmaking would have been for women everywhere. Having said that, having pinpointed how history was not kind to Alice Guy, I also want to appreciate the approach of the documentary, because, like, documentaries are a very interesting medium because they always have two layers. One is the main subject of the documentary, in this case, Alice Guy, whom I've spoken about so far. Another layer is the investigation that goes into that subject. So documentaries are both the story and it's behind the scenes per se. So even Be Natural interspersed between showing Alice Guy's contribution to cinema and the director Pamela V. Green uncovering more and more about it. So what I loved about her approach was how she never mystified Guy's life or her work. Guy made good films not because she was, say, possessed by some inexplicable genius, but simply because she was so brilliant at it. She was just so good at it. She was determined, she was curious, she was kind and loving, yet troubled by personal setbacks in life, as any of us. Pamela humanized Guy rather than mythologizing her, which we see in most cases of male directors. You know, it's a common saying there can be no one like Kubrick or Tarantino or James Cameron, even though they all have quite a problematic history behind the scenes. For instance, it's widely known how Kubrick mistreated the actress who worked in The Shining. And uh, even Uma Thurman recently came out how she was put through a lot of physical harm while working with Tarantino on Kill Bill. And there are all these other instances of toxic environments, working environments in the film industry, particularly on productions helmed by men. But as we see in the documentary, she created a very supportive and nurturing environment for whoever was working with her while being very headstrong and determined. So, like, people can say, you know, there can be no one like him or no one like that filmmaker or this filmmaker. But for the sake of women in filmmaking, I wish there to be many, many more Alice Guys in cinema who can transform the medium with their curiosity and consideration. With that, I'd like to open the space for everyone to sort of come forward and share their opinions. I know my job is to just give a talk, but if everyone's comfortable when they're speaking about it, I'd love to know your experience of watching the documentary, how it made you feel, and if there were any particular scenes or instances that really resonated with you. I'd be really glad to hear what you have to say about it. So yeah, if anyone wants to speak, they can come forward.
Thanks very much, Saundarya, for opening out these issues, and also looks like it's a documentary on a subject that is very close to you. So if anyone wants to say anything at this point, you're welcome. Yes, Geeta, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Saundarya, for this film, for suggesting this film, because I had not watched it before. I had not even heard of it. So I'm really grateful for that. And like you have said, it is absolutely fascinating to think of, how a woman made her beginnings in, not just made her beginnings in cinema, but laid the ground for cinema itself, and especially narrative cinema. And I thought the documentary was very well crafted. And along with that, the historical background that it gave was also something very really illuminating, the war and all of that coming in, and how in the midst of all that she worked, and then and not just working as a filmmaker in the creative field, but also being a producer and setting up a studio, and also her very disturbing personal life, So all that put together, I thought it was a really well-made documentary. Thank you very much for suggesting this.
Samvartha sir suggested it, and he then again suggested that I should speak about it. So you should thank
Okay,
him.
yeah, thank you, Samvartha. Thank you so much.
Okay, would anyone else want to come in at this point? While you collect your thoughts, Saundarya, I'd like to respond to the film, both as someone who was, who's watching this particular film, but also as someone, who teaches film history. I mean, at various levels, this film is extremely interesting. One dimension, of course, is about a forgotten filmmaker. And what is interesting about this film is it captures the process of forgetting. Even as, it is about memorializing and bringing her back, so to speak, it also captures how she gets written out of history, even in her own lifetime. So this idea of Alice Guy trying to, find herself in the histories that were written even during her time was very, very fascinating. So that is one part of it, it can happen particularly to women in many fields, including filmmaking. But it can happen virtually to anyone, particularly in places like India, where you don't have either the resources or the persistence, or even the archiving facilities, or even private collectors, who and families who see the value of their predecessors. I think something like this can be even more challenging. So I was thinking of this film more as a, as a film that probably I will use to problematize film historiography. Because what does film history rely on? Film historiographers, historians of cinema, what do they rely on to write their histories? Who gets memorialized? Who gets to be part of the canon? And why is it? I mean, sometimes when I teach this particular aspect, in the context of Indian cinema, I contrast the way in which somebody like Falke, so conscious of his own place and position in history that he actually puts on the credits. He calls himself the pioneer filmmaker of the East. And so he kind of perpetuates his own history and his own myth as the father of Indian cinema. And whatever his wife, however, Saraswati Bai, who was so much a part of his filmmaking activity, even supporting him in the dark room. I mean, I don't know if we even talk about her when we write film histories. But for every Falke who succeeded, there must have been so many who may not have succeeded, or who succeeded and have got, written out of film histories. So in that sense, particularly the contemporary contingencies when film histories get written also dictate who gets remembered and how, and who gets written out. Also, this terrain of attributing films to someone, that is also a very slippery terrain. From today's conceptual category of a director, when we look back at those times, I'm sure the two are not coeval. The director of today may not be what we understand by the director in those times. So, I mean, there were many things, in fact, so it's a film that certainly I feel is invaluable as a pedagogic tool as well to discuss the larger problem of film historiography. I'll stop here. Maybe others have things to say. If anyone wants to come in at this point, please unmute. If Saundarya, you want to respond, you can go ahead too. Anyone else would like to speak now? Yes, Tarakeshwar, please go ahead.
Yeah, because there's nobody else, I thought I will pitch in. I agree with Nikhila when she says that the problem of writing the history of films is also about the categories that we employ. The categories that have been concretized today were very fluid at that point of time. So when we are superimposing these categories, which are very clear-cut, defined and credited today, and then looking at the beginning of film in the late 19th century, these problems do occur. I'm not discounting the role of patriarchy in obliterating this particular director's name, but I'm also trying to understand what is at stake when we write histories of history of film or history of cinema, history of film industry. One is the categories, and the second one is was it Hello? Okay. Was it a patriarchy dominant when she entered the film industry, or it was possible for her to enter the industry and do the work? Because time and again in her interviews, she says that she did not face any problems as a woman in the beginning. So this problem of credit comes only after in around 50s, going through the documentary. So once the film industry or this phenomena called cinema gets established in the society, does patriarchy take over it? Not only the industry, but also writing about the industry is something that I was wondering.
I think that's a very good observation and question, because as per my understanding of film history and what was shown in the documentary, when we started making movies for profit, and most of these studios were run by men at that time, I think you're right that patriarchy did start playing a role in it, and also how we perceived the role of a woman in a society. Because at that time when she started making movies, there was a lot of creative freedom as to what kind of movies you could make. But as the technology progressed and as people realized that movies have a great business potential, they wanted to make only certain kind of movies that worked with the audiences. For instance, even now we're seeing fewer and fewer independent movies being made, and if they're being made, they're not being shown in the theaters. We're streaming them on OTT, or we're downloading them from elsewhere. So I think the more movies we make and the more we make them for profit, it tends to hamper with the sanctity of the medium, and rather than democratizing the art form, it restricts it, which is what I feel happened with her. And also the fact that in terms of her personal life also, she met with a lot of setbacks. In the end, she was not a superhuman filmmaker. She was also human, who was vulnerable to all these circumstances in her life, and I think that also played a really important role later on in her career.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a very important point, Saundarya, particularly, what happens to her in her marriage. For most men, it may not impact the way in which the end of her marriage also signals her, career in America virtually. So she returns to France, and it's like she has to begin afresh. Her CV gathered, in America does not seem to matter to her anymore when she goes to Paris. So this is peculiarly and particularly something that is associated with women in virtually all fields, I would think, where so much of your personal life seems to loom so large in the way it impacts your professional life. So thanks for drawing our attention to that. Anyone else who would like to come in? Please unmute yourself so I know that you want to speak. Ajanta, Nandini, anyone? Samvartha, since you suggested the film, is there anything that, would you want to come in? Would you like to say something about it?
Hi.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
I'm audible. No, I mean, like you mentioned, and so did Geeta. I did not know about Alice Key for the longest time, and as Saundarya was mentioning, I mean, even when I briefly touch upon the history of, film, or probably, the grammar of cinema. I would go to, Lumiere brothers, then George Millet, then Porter, and all that. But Alice Keys never featured. So once I got to know about her, first thing I felt was shame. Like, how could this even happen? Like, but yes, it's a history of, writing history and history. As you said, it's a history of forgetting. But once I got to know about Alice Key, I've just make it a point. Any class that I'm teaching or any course that I'm teaching, like, just mention Alice Key. That's the only way, I can actually kind of participate in actually kind of, undoing what has been done, probably. If so, it was just, as an extension of that, because of, I personally did not know about Alice Key, and then, knowing her actually, what was the most surprising thing is that, it's not just that, I didn't know, even the who is who of, in the film business also kind of did not know, which becomes evident in this particular documentary. Even before watching this documentary, when I just got to know a bit about Alice Guy itself, it surprised me a lot. Once this documentary, I laid my hands on this film documentary, I realized, it's not just me. Like, everyone, nobody seemed to have known about Alice Guy. And that was even the more shocking. And that's when actually I kind of suggested this film. And yeah, because I don't know. The more I think, the more we discuss it, is the only way in which you can actually kind of try to actually kind of undo things that, which we were also, unknowingly party to, of writing history and actually kind of normalizing this entire thing. As to, it begins with George Millet narratives. No, as someone says in the documentary itself, she was not the first female director. She was the first director, because what Lumiere brothers were doing in 1895, 1896, they are not directing. They are just placing the camera and actually kind of, documenting things. But Alice Guy directs. She's writing also from the very beginning. So she's the first film writer. She's the first film director. All those things. It's so fascinating and so sad to actually kind of, that in her lifetime, she was not given the, credit that she, what is to be given, that is was not given. That's one part. It was snatched from her and attributed to someone else. It was, it's even the more cruel. All the credits. So, I remember someone in the doc, no, not in someone, it's actually PK Nair himself in Celluloid Man, actually, when he says that, see, I mean, the job of a curator, a historian, is not to evaluate which film is good, which film is bad. I mean, if there is anything, I mean, if there is any film, then it's a cultural product. I mean, it's a cultural material which you need to actually kind of keep as a part of the archive. Then you have to keep as a preserve as a part of archive, as a part of history. And whether Alice Guy was the, I mean, she need not have been preserved, her films need not have been preserved, or actually kind of she had to be given credit because she's the first director or anything. But the fact that, I mean, she was making films itself is sufficient to actually kind of to keep her recorded in the history. That itself actually kind of goes missing, which makes us doubt as to, I mean, what is history finally. Then actually probably, I mean, history, I mean, as Hayden White says, I mean, probably it's also a literary artifact which we actually kind of construct the way we wish to, depending not on what is what happened, but what we want to actually kind of the kind of narrative that we wish to build, and how even that actually kind of, I mean, gets gendered is one of the things which actually kind of, I mean, becomes important. I mean, for me, I mean, this film became important not just to know about Alice Guy, but also actually about the whole. I mean, as you mentioned, Geeta mentioned, and even Tarakeshwar sir mentioned, I mean, about the writing of history itself and how actually kind of things get problematic. And yeah, I mean, now that, okay, I mean, we have had this what is, I mean, film history, and at least, I mean, even when reading about film history, we knew that, okay, I mean, there was always this common, what is, I mean, who did it first kind of competition between Europe and America. But even there, actually, kind of it becomes a, I mean, what is, I mean, boxing event between, I mean, men. And what gets lost even in that also is this question, which I mean, the issue as to, I mean, claiming history is something which is not new to us. Even that has a political, I mean, politics of its own kind. I mean, that was also, yeah, for me, I mean, the question for, I mean, ever since, I mean, I discovered the film has been, okay, I mean, now we have had the, I mean, film has been there for nearly 130 years, and film history has been there for so long. Now that we discover Alice Guy, what to do? I mean, how from here, actually, how do we actually kind of, I mean, bring her back, or I mean, to kind of, I mean, correct the, I mean, as a part of that, actually, I just, I mean, suggested that film. That was the only reason, and also to share this joy of discovering Alice Guy. That just two things. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samvartha. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It was a sudden discovery for me. For instance, you know, when I came across Shivram Karanth in his autobiography, writing about his filmmaking experiments, which are more disasters to begin with. I mean, no history, film history documents such failures, though they are invaluable, you know, in terms of, you know, telling us how it's not just today that anyone with a camera can shoot a film. So there was Karanth making a film and making films repeatedly only to succeed, I mean, only to fail each time, not meet with success each time. So as opposed to Karanth, here is a woman who has not only made successful films, but has also run a film studio. So it's one of those, you know, imponderables that someone like her got completely written out of history. So to me, it seems like one part of the problem is of categorization of roles. You know, so what was she when, you know, when history is written, what was she credited for? And in the 1975 discussion of early cinema, each one of those experts who have gathered to talk about silent cinema, they are, you know, all saying different things. So I thought some of these nuances were very fascinating for me from, you know, my takeaways from the film. Thank you so much, Samvartha.
Just, I mean, one more, since you
Yes,
mentioned
please.
about Karan making films, I was surprised. Karan's experiments with films was, probably, because he's, I'm from the coast. It was something which I got to know a bit early because someone mentioned or something. But for me, actually, once in a conversation, Shamik Bandyopadhyay mentioned that even Tagore had made films which are not accessible. It's only, understandable that Tagore would have actually kind of, kind of tried to make a film, given his interest. But Shamik shared a small excerpt from a letter that Tagore had written to someone, one of his relatives, where actually he speaks about how cinema should actually kind of discover its own language. Literature cannot breathe down the throat of cinema. He mentions that. And I thought, Tagore had a very good understanding as to this new medium has to actually kind of find a different grammar. And it really kind of surprised me because Tagore experimenting with film was something which again probably has, it has not, the films are not available, that's said. And Tagore's interest in film is also not something that is much discussed. And Tagore's understanding of film is also something which actually kind of goes missing when we actually kind of discuss about the Indian film history also. So for me, whether Tagore's film was interesting or not is, I don't know because we don't have access. But Tagore's understanding of film was something which is very important to me. And even, if not, Shamikda had not translated that part from Bangla to English, I wouldn't have been able to actually kind of access it. I wouldn't have known. So, all those things, so many things actually kind of get lost, and so many, it's not, the films getting lost is one thing, but that understanding was more important to me when it was about Tagore. Yeah, so just felt like sharing. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to come in? Sanjay? Oh, Sanjay is not here, I think. Okay, Madhurima? Yeah, Tarkeshwar, please go ahead.
Because again, there is nobody else. I thought I will chip in. Again, the question is about what Samvartha was saying. Some of his points raises the issue of what is the object of inquiry, the object of history, and how do we construct it? In film studies, when we talk about film history, what does it mean? History of films or history of the people who made the films, or history of the, as Samvartha was saying, the ideas that underlie those practices of that period. So whether the Tagore's films are not available, whether available or not, but what Tagore thought about films, what was the idea of films in the practice of the Tagore, or Karan, or Alice Guy. That is more, if that is the thing that we are looking at. Or are we trying to recuperate gender by constructing the history of the film industry? I think this documentary is more interested in, though individual, through the individual, it looks like trying to make amends to the gender aspect of the constructed history of films. So in that sense, it is trying to make them. If that is the object of inquiry, that is recast the film industry through the lens of gender, then how do we do it? I think the film is not simply about Alice Guy, but also about how do we construct it? How do we put together the quote unquote the evidence that is required to construct a narrative about her? So in that sense, looking for individuals and through them trying to trace the other individuals who might have quote unquote the evidence to reconstruct the past. So in that sense, the interviews, the movement, the umpteen number of video calls, and trying to obtain video cassette or audio cassette
Yeah.
or some letter and ask their relationship, who with whom they worked, and then trying to contact them. So the methodology is also quite interesting. And in fact, the documentary flaunts that methodology. Rather than telling the story, it is also telling the story of how the story was made possible. What are the ways through which it got constructed? That also it lays bare. So in that sense, in terms of the methodology of creating a archive where none exists and creating the evidence through the archives that already exist and sifting through it, that is also laid bare in this film. So in that sense, this film is also quite interesting for the methodology of both archiving as well as sifting through the archive. There might be films, but how do we know we require it? It is something that is quite interesting in that sense, this documentary.
Yeah, and I also thought, I mean, on the one hand, while the early part of the film tells us, that nothing is found, so there are dead ends. But towards the end, the sudden discovery of this interview, the video of the interview, so we are seeing the video interview, and then on the one hand, we are being told that nothing seems to exist of her. So the sudden kind of, or the build up to how this happened, the way in which this interview by an interested historian who documents his neighbor, the famous Alice Guy, came to be, and that's where this footage has come from. So that's not revealed right at the outset. So it comes to us, almost towards the end. So that is also quite nicely done in the film. Also, the rapid intercuts, that kind of move between different times and different sources, as Tarakeshwar was saying, are very, very fascinating. Yeah, anyone else? So is it that people have not watched the film? Yes, Rasha, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for this movie, suggesting the movie. And I would like to agree with what you just said, that although this was a documentary, it has a way of grabbing one's attention. And like I felt from the beginning when they were talking about not having enough resources about her life, I felt frustrated. And then towards the end, I was really happy, and I felt that I'm like connected to this woman, even if I haven't heard of her before. I felt as if she is my great grandmother as well. But overall, this documentary was really interesting and inspirational, not just because of the story of this woman, this female director, Alice Guy, but also the woman who has done this research. And I felt very inspired and motivated by, both the making of the documentary and the story of this female director. So thank you for suggesting and discussing this film. Thank you.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I'd
Yes, Tanima. Sorry, you wanted to say something. Go ahead, Saundarya.
no,
Tanima,
please. No, Tanima can speak first. It's all right.
okay, yeah. Tanima, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This is my first time on this platform. So I was just listening to the discussion. So there are three things which I felt, which actually caught my attention. The first thing was what I felt when I was watching this entire documentary, the blatant ignorance which was there about Alice Guy's contribution to the filmmaking, and the audacity, because towards the end of the documentary, you could see that even after her autobiography was published, there are still doubts that people have about whether she was still the first female director. I would use the term which was used in the documentary, that first female director. Even there, people would still have the doubt. So the blatant ignorance and the resulting audacity which was there. So that is something which is really fascinating for me, which through this documentary. Then the second thing which I felt was, of course, the entire documentary is about Alice Guy, but I also felt something about the connection that Alice Guy had with her daughter, which was there represented in the documentary with Simone, her daughter, and the camaraderie that they shared. And the final thing which I felt from this documentary was towards the end how she, the determination, sheer determination that she had for to search, to find out more about her own films, which were lost even during her lifetime. And like the she was writing her memoir, but it was getting rejected multiple times. But still, she continued with her search, with writing her memoir, and still sending it out to multiple publishers. And her journey from different to US, to different other countries with her daughter, that struck a chord somewhere within me. So yeah, I this is what I felt about the documentary, and yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to share this one with you.
Thank you, Tanima. Saundarya, go ahead. You were saying something. Do you also want to respond to Tanima?
Yeah, like she said, that she was really determined to sort of get back her, not get back, but to sort of keep a memoir of her own of the work that she's done, and sort of chronicle it for herself. And it was really unfortunate that she couldn't access her own filmography. But sometimes these things, they happen by default, which is what I was coming at, when there is a certain kind of technological advancement in any industry, or the business model changes. Because the struggles that she started facing in her career, I guess, came around at the same time that films started transitioning from silent to talkies. And that's a very interesting period, because at that time, a lot of people were compelled to drop out and leave behind. Like, everything became really streamlined. You had all these, sound stages, and like, the entire business of making movies changed almost overnight when the first talkie came out. And like Alice Guy mentioned, that even with making silent films, it was never easy to make a movie. It was really hard to make a movie in those tough conditions, when first of all, you didn't have like very advanced equipment, because film technology was in its nascent stages back then. So to deal with the equipment, to deal with the set, to deal with the artists, and at the same time to experiment with the art form, it wasn't easy. And these were the people who pioneered the form. But when cinema transitioned to talkies, like, a lot of people were just left out of the history, because then the history became about pictures that did not only move, but they also had sound, and they also had people talking to each other, and they had dialogue. So I think that's one unfortunate thing about cinema, or for that matter, any art form, that when it progresses, at the same time, it leaves behind a lot too. And I think that's also one of the factors that contributed to Alice Guy being left out of history, and not just her, for that matter. During that period, there were many other figures who worked really hard during the silent era. There's this movie that came out last year, if anyone's interested in watching it. It's called Babylon. It's directed by Damien Chazelle, the director of La La Land and Whiplash. And it chronicles the very same thing, how the film era transitioned from silent to movies with dialogue. And although it's partly fictionalized, it's also based on real figures, and it's a really heartbreaking film for any film lover to watch, because when you see how they made movies in those first 10-12 years, it was magic. It was actually magical, and then everything became very business-like, very corporate, very professional. and you couldn't really experiment with the form anymore, which Alice Guy also mentions, in the documentary, that maybe I can't make the same kind of movies anymore, because at that time you could really sort of run wild with your ideas and imagination, especially with her, who was one of the first people to, make the leap in cinema from reality to imagination. So yeah, I think that's kind of a sad part about the art form itself.
Yeah, thanks for drawing attention to this important transition era where, a lot of people dropped out of the industry. Stars who did not have the requisite feminine voice, who could not sing because films demanded that. So all your silent era, actors, many of them just disappeared. So also it's a different mode of production, as you rightly pointed out. So that also means, people had to drop out. And so they also dropped out from everyone's memory as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone else? And Tanima's point about the mother-daughter, relationship in the film, that is also quite nice. And also the daughter at some point seems to suggest that why don't you just burn up your material and give up this quest? But the mother is persistent. So that was also very, very interesting. Ajanta, okay, so she says she has to log off, and such an inspiring film. Thanks, Ajanta. Anyone else? I hope, Saundarya, we are not keeping you from your other engagements, or do you want to leave too?
No, I'll leave in 5 minutes. It's all right.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else? Sonia, please go ahead. Yes.
No, I just wanted to make a comment. Listening to the discussion, one of the first things I did was to Google search to find out who's the first female director in India, because I never gave it a thought ever. And I wanted to kind of ask and kind of find out, do we have such hidden characters even in Indian film history that we don't know about? And should there be some sort of, or is there some work being done to unearth some of these hidden gems of Indian film history as well? Also, one of the thoughts that while the discussion was on, that comes to the mind is that we are still talking about women being written off history, or we're rediscovering women who have contributed and probably revisiting history to identify their roles. That also shows that we're still living in a world of binary genders, and maybe there are other, and we should probably use this forum to even look at other genders and talents, and work that is being done by the other communities within, because we are hopefully should be moving towards a world which is not so binary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think why Alice Guy's story and why the documentary itself is very interesting is not because it has a gendered perspective, but it questions the concept of history itself. How do we decide what to remember and what not to remember? And someone mentions the documentary as well. Who will keep history alive, more importantly? When it comes to cinema, that's a question that people have been pondering since a while now. And speaking of what's happening in the Indian space, I don't know if we are unearthing any gems from the old days, but I know that whatever films that we have on celluloid, a lot of organizations and foundations are doing good work in preserving that work for future generations, and not only just the preservation efforts, they're trying to promote the art of film restoration and preservation at large as well. So I think that's a positive change that we are witnessing, because going forward, everything's on digital, like whatever art is being made, it's on digital. But if you look back at like 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. So to even, protect that, to preserve that part of our film history, it means a lot.
And Sonia, I mean, I would also think, yeah, as I said in the beginning, we neither have the persistence nor the resources, that is visible in this film to do the massive kind of unearthing of new histories. And who should write these kind of histories and why? This is also an important question. But early film historians like Nipa Majumdar, Rosie Thomas, there is some work that is happening on, in the Indian space on women in cinema. I'm not sure about, women directors, but certainly about women who are stars, the first stars of Indian cinema being women and so on. But it's nothing compared to the scale, of resources and materials available for writing a history like the one that we just saw in the film, Sonia. Anyone else who wants to say anything? Pallav, anything to say? Any response? Yes, Samvartha, please go ahead.
Since we were talking about film history and all of that, I just felt like sharing this one small thing which I discovered just few months ago. This also actually, I chanced upon in a second-hand bookshop. There was a book which I found called To Be Continued. And it's about how this episodic nature of film, audiovisual making. I thought, okay, it probably was started with television, but it had started in 1920s in America. Because that's the time when actually theaters were done. How do you actually kind of keep making people come back to the theater? So one of the ways they found out was actually kind of having the film, leaving at a cliffhanger and saying to be continued in a nearby theater next, after a point. So then actually it would continue. So this whole episodic nature of storytelling was existing in 1920s. And again, as a student of film, it was something which I did not know of. That these episodic films were actually being shown in the theaters also, and that too in the 1920s it had actually kind of started. It's about what gets documented, what gets written in the history books, and how much of it actually kind of and is circulated among people, right? Because Alice Guy writes her autobiography and memoir and all of that, but how much of it actually kind of gets a circulation among people and among people who actually kind of can keep it alive? Even that actually kind of becomes important. Just writing it, documenting it probably isn't sufficient. There is something more that actually kind of goes into it. And I was really fascinated. I'm still trying to find out if these old episodic films are available. And I'm not finding any of that. But for me, it was purely, business model. How to get people back to the theater. But it actually kind of gives it into a different kind of storytelling. In cinema. That's a very interesting part. Today we see it in OTTs and actually kind of, the series. That kind of storytelling was existing even before, even when cinema theaters, existed at that, in 1920s. So that's again, how much of it gets documented, how much of it gets discussed, and how much of it actually becomes a part of the collective knowledge. Yeah, that's all. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Samvartha, and Saundarya, thanks. If you have to leave now, thank you so much for joining this discussion, though you had other commitments. Thank you very much. We'll say bye to you. But if
Good night.
Yeah, sorry, you were saying something?
No, I was just saying good night to everybody, and I want to thank TFO again for inviting me for this lovely conversation. I'm really grateful to be a part of this evening. So yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Saundarya. So others can continue the discussion. If there's anything else to say, we can continue the discussion. Anyone who has not spoken so far? Yes, Madhurima, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. Sorry, I could not unmute myself at that point of time. I don't really have a different comment from the discussion that was going on, but I could relate to the part that Tarkeshwar sir said regarding the methodology that gets space into the film, like how Alice Guy was discovered and the patience that these researchers had in order to search for her films, her voice, and how the film is not only about how about Alice Guy's films or her role as a director, but also how Alice Guy is constructed and how this film is made. So that was really interesting, and also how this film or this documentary uses different sounds and visual imagery in order to hold our interest for almost 2 hours. That is also very interesting. Yeah, that is all I had to say, and I really enjoyed watching the film. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madhurima. Anyone else? Sridhar, Yogesh, Nandini? Okay. If there are no more comments about the film, then let me take this opportunity to thank everyone who made this discussion possible. Samvartha, Saundarya, and all of you who joined us tonight. So thank you all very much, and have a very good weekend and good night. Next Saturday at 9 o'clock, we meet again for discussing yet another interesting film on Talking Films Online. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Bye.